One of the big debates which progressives have been having more recently is whether or not we're going to be supporting Joe Biden when it comes to the general election. Some progressives argue that you're going to have a lot more leverage in a potential Biden administration if you support Joe Biden. Just suck it up and support Joe Biden. Other progressives argue that no, you get a lot more leverage by saying that, look, I'm not going to be supporting you. I'm going to, hold down a certain list of policies, X, Y, Z, and if you don't support these things, if you don't agree to doing these things in your first 100 days, then look, you're never going to have my vote. And guess what? To all other politicians out there, same thing applies to you. Set down a clear list of standards and shift the Overton window. That's sort of the big debate which we've been having. And Briahna Joy Gray came out here not necessarily to weigh in on this debate, but to sort of give her overall view where she stands on this thing. Briahna Joy Gray saying here, with the utmost respect for Bernie Sanders, who is an incredible human being and a genuine inspiration, I do not endorse Joe Biden. I supported Bernie Sanders because he backed ideas like Medicare for all, canceling all student debt, and a wealth tax. Biden supports none of these. And she went on here to retweet this article in which AOC basically says, look, I've always said that I would be supporting the eventual Democratic nominee, but if you really want to win progressives, if you actually want to have any chance of getting their vote, especially in the long run, what you've got to do is do more than symbolic things. You've got to do more than lip service to us. You have to actually back real policies and do real action, do real change if you want to have any chance of, actually winning our votes. And so that's one of the big debates we've been having, because it's starting to see here that there seems to be a distinction between, whether or not you're going to endorse someone and whether or not you are actually, going to turn around and vote for him. Because technically, Briahna Joy Gray, despite all the attacks which she has been getting, never technically said that she would not be voting for Joe Biden. She just said that she would not endorse Joe Biden. Right. So that's, one of the sort of distinctions which we're having, and which Twitter does not seem to be. I mean, Twitter is never friendly to having, any kind of nuance or distinctions. But who knows? I mean, Briahna Joy Gray may be saying that she wouldn't be voting for Joe Biden. I mean, I'm open to having that debate as well, right? But, my point is, though, there seems to be a level of nuance which does seem to be missing from this debate here. And then this was probably one of the best replies here, before I get into some of the other things here. Dems, when they realize that Bernie bros that they told to go fuck themselves are actually independent swing voters. Because, of course, we always think that the independent swing voters are moderates, right? Whereas almost actually just about every single study at this point backing up the idea that actually independents are most likely more partisan than actually, sort of Democratic registered or Republican registered, right? So very partisan voters, but might not turn out and vote for a particular candidate, right? And so it's very possible that a lot of these Bernie Sanders supporters out there are like, look, you didn't support the things that I want. You didn't actually back my values. So why would I come out and vote for you? Right. So that seems to be one of the big debates which we've been having. They're going to be, of course, Pikachu meme here. They are going to be completely shocked by this thing, which every single study ever in the past 15 years has been sort of backing up. But Briahna Joy Gray, unsurprisingly, got a lot of really racist attacks here coming at her, saying that she is the David Sirota in blackface. I mean, really disgusting and incredibly racist messages here. Incredibly racist. Joe Biden, are you going to be calling out your toxic and racist supporters? I mean, just toxic Biden bros here. And then here, basically Briahna Joy Gray saying the same thing here, because saying Bri isn't qualified to walk Elizabeth Warren's dog. She is gutter trash. And Briahna Joy Gray saying here, Joe Biden should also consider reaching out to his supporters and the supporters of other candidates who have more toxic and racist and misogynistic than anything I've ever seen from a person purporting to back Bernie. This is not how unity is forged. Really good point there. I mean, you're definitely not going to win over Bernie Sanders supporters if that's the thing that you actually want. I don't know that it is. You're not going to win over Bernie Sanders supporters by sort of browbeating them and attacking them and, lecturing them about how they're not good people because they might not vote for Joe Biden. Instead, you should actually, focus your effort on trying to get Joe Biden to support left-wing policies so that then, we're more inclined to come around and support your candidate, right? That's probably would be a million times more effective. Now, that might not work for you. You might be like, well, there's nothing that Joe Biden could do. But I think that it's fair to say that, if these people spent more of their energy trying to convince Joe Biden to move to the left to get us, that, it probably would work for a lot of people out there. Now, Briahna Joy Gray here saying, though, on the live stream today, Biden thinks that thinks it's ridiculous that we don't have healthcare as a human right. If that's true, I look forward to him embracing Medicare for all. So again, the big debate which we've been having more recently is how we actually move forward when it comes to policy. And I actually want to show you this here from Matt Iglesias, this incredibly ridiculous, in my opinion, ridiculous tweet here, ridiculous take, to show you sort of a bit of the divide here. Matt Iglesias saying, I think Biden should reach out to the left by deleting some stuff from his current platform and then re-adding it back in and saying that he's embracing big progressive ideas in order to appeal to the left, like how a massive investment in clean energy, jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So Matt Iglesias is saying that Joe Biden is sufficiently progressive. Joe Biden is incredibly progressive, and so what he should do is just basically do nothing, delete his stuff, and then re-add it, being like, wow, look at all of the incredible overtures that I'm doing to the left. Genuinely just a kind of insulting take here. Matt Iglesias responding here, the delete and repost move would then give the sunlight the sunlight it's sunrise movement, by the way, sunlight movement, the pretext it needs to delete and drop that embarrassing F- thing and say that Biden has a solid Green New Deal agenda, which is not in any way true. Joe Biden's climate plan isn't sufficient. It simply factually is not sufficient to meet the needs of the crisis, right? Because that's the point which we've been having right now, right? Whereas Matt Iglesias has been attacking the sunrise movement, saying, hey, look, what you got to do here is actually have, you got to grade on a curve, because Joe Biden's plan is better than Donald Trump's. Therefore, how are you going to give both of them an F? But the point here is that they both failed the test, right? Joe Biden got a 39, and I don't know the actual number, but say Joe Biden got a 39 and Donald Trump got a 29. Well, they both failed the test, right? So we're not grading on a curve here. We're not saying that because Joe Biden did better than Donald Trump that, oh, well, the climate, the planet's going to be okay. That's not what we're saying. That's not sufficient, right? And so Matt Iglesias, clearly not really understanding the sort of existential nature of climate change and how the left sees the issue of climate change as existential. And I think that that's really important. If you've seen some of my other videos talking about this issue, I said that, when it comes to voting, it's a real issue of existentialism, because when it came to Donald Trump, right, he was able to pitch a Hillary Clinton win as completely existential, right? Like the Supreme Court, like, America isn't going to be recognizable anymore, that America would be destroyed if Hillary Clinton won because of these cultural values, these cultural things. But when the left seems to look at some of these issues, they're saying, well, Joe Biden, him winning would also be existential because he's also going to destroy the planet. He also doesn't support Medicare for all. So we're going to look at, thousands and thousands of people continuing to die because they don't have health care, because they can't afford health care. We're talking about massive medical debt. We're still going to be looking at a situation where students can't afford to pay their student loans. They can't afford to go to college. They can't afford to, start a family. They can't afford to buy a home. So it's existential. It's existentially bad if Joe Biden wins. It's existentially bad if Donald Trump wins. Okay, maybe Joe Biden makes it so that the the planet dies a few years later. What's the real difference? That's the arguments. That's the sort of argument that the left has been giving in response to some of this. And I just absolutely love Brian Grimm's response right here, saying, I reported in my book that the Obama administration asked green groups to stop saying climate change and instead do clean energy because it polled better, which of course it did. Clean is great. Energy is great. Clean energy, wow, that's the greatest. But the predictable result was that natural gas ran a campaign calling itself clean, and it boomed. Now, of course, Matt Iglesias commented in response here saying, and thanks in part to the natural gas boom, emissions fell, to which Ryan Grimm responds here saying, measurements which, as you know, don't fully include methane, which, as you know, is way worse than carbon. So really good point there, because, one of the things that I've always talked about on this channel is it's actually really important to stand up for the things that you believe in, as opposed to trying to poll test and try to move to where other people are. Because the simple fact is, guys, when it comes to politics, most people aren't paying attention, guys. And, most people will say in general, if things aren't terrible, they'll say, yeah, I guess I like it. I guess it's good. I guess it's all right, if they don't see a potential alternative. So what you got to do is sort of present a clear and distinct alternative. And if you don't do that, then people aren't actually going to move on the issue. Because when you look at polling numbers, you think, oh, well, it's easy to persuade people to support an entire agenda. But it turns out by getting them to support clean energy, that doesn't mean that they're supporting the entire movement that comes with it, right? So there's a complete distinction there. Whereas if you say, look, you've got to be fighting against climate change, and then you make it particularly clear what that means, then you can talk about actually persuading people. The goal of politics is not just to get people to say, okay, well, I'm on board with that. You actually have to persuade people. And that's what poll testing really misses when it comes to this thing, right? When it came to Pete Buttigieg, remember he initially came out saying that he was in support of Medicare for all, single payer, even arguing that Medicare for all is the centrist, is the sort of moderate position because, you know, you have your NHS position, and then you have, you know, sort of the free for all of, you know, private industry, Medicare for all being the compromise because you've got public funding going into, you know, sort of private industries, private hospitals, right? That was Pete Buttigieg. That was what he initially said. Then he looked at some polling, he looked at some numbers, and then switched around and said, actually, I support Medicare for all who want it, which is basically just, you know, nice wording for a public option. And so then you end up in a situation where Pete Buttigieg moves his position and then isn't able to bring public opinion with him, right? Because he just looks at and he's more interested in trying to win an election than actually trying to persuade people and win their hearts and win their minds. That's something that I've always been opposed to. No matter what your personal positions are, no matter what your personal policies are, I've always said that what you've got to do is actually fight for the thing that you believe in and not try to like, you know, do the sort of, you know, tricky, you know, try to do the dance, trying to, you know, be all slick, trying to figure out, you know, what other people try to think. Because what if they're trying to figure out what you think, right? Because most people don't know the sort of ins and outs, the details of how policy actually works. And so they're trying to sort of gauge. They're listening to the different positions, and then they're like, well, that sounds nice, that doesn't sound nice. And then they think of themselves maybe as kind of a moderate, and then they kind of just move to the middle. They kind of listen to the debate, move to the middle, or they, you know, sort of work it out, right? Very, very few, you know, they sort of work it out and kind of listen to the different alternatives among the alternatives that are being presented, right? So what you got to do is, you know, explain how your idea is the moderate position, or at the very least explain how your position isn't crazy, isn't going to overturn things. In other words, you've got to pitch it to their temperament, their mood, how they feel about things. Very few people actually have like worked out sets of policies. Like if you're watching this video, you're probably like pretty nose deep into politics. You probably do have a list of policies that you really, really support, but a lot of people don't. They don't have time for it. They've got busy lives. You know, work takes up, you know, work is really stressful. And so what you got to do is actually be able to find a way to present your policies in a way that, you know, anyone can understand what you're trying to say. Anyone can really get, you know, sort of where you're going with things. And, you know, anyway, so I'm not a big fan when it comes to trying to just, you know, move into the position that other people already agree with. You've really got to fight for your views and not just immediately slide on things. And Briahna Joy Gray responding here, this entire exchange is just absolutely extraordinary. Basically saying that, basically saying that, oh, well, Matt Iglesias saying, oh, well, emissions fell. And then, you know, Ryan Grimm, as he said here, responding how bad methane is. How, you know, I mean, it really is just such an extraordinary exchange there, such an extraordinary instance of, you know, just what neoliberalism is all about. This, you know, centrist mood, this centrist idea of, okay, well, you poll tested and look, emissions fell, it worked. But not really, because methane is significantly worse. So Briahna Joy Gray, excellent responses there as always. I really like her. She does fantastic stuff. I saw a tweet there over the weekend saying that, oh, I think it was Frank Luntz I'm pretty sure it was Frank Luntz coming out saying that Briahna Joy Gray is the reason why Bernie Sanders lost, which is a completely ridiculous take there. I actually disagree. Briahna Joy Gray was probably one of my favorite parts of the Bernie Sanders campaign. I really love her messaging. I really love her style. And it's really nice, honestly, to see, and refreshing, I should say, to see her really give her like real takes now that Bernie Sanders has dropped out. You know, I may not always agree. I mean, so far I've agreed with everything, but who knows, maybe she'll start tweeting things that I don't agree with. But I'm always going to love being able to see sort of her sort of fresh take on things, because I think that she has an interesting way of telling things, an interesting way of saying things, and she's an incredibly nice and soft-spoken person. I mean, I feel like you know, anyone who's just like reading her Twitter and then saying that, oh, she's just this terrible person, she's, you know, really, really mean and insensitive or the like, just doesn't know her, like, or even try to like watch half of her anyway. That's just sort of my take on this thing. So anyway, if you like the video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.